They are much more fearful of the Colombian system. Colombian narco-traffickers want to go to jail in the U.S. instead of Colombia. You don't believe that, but it's true. You need a guy as powerful as that is more fearful of your attorney than the attorney of the U.S. And you know how long is the hands, how strong the U.S. judicial system is. But that is the only way to check on things. And you have to, if you need to put in jail governors, you put in jail governors. If you need to put in jail ministers, you put in jail ministers. If you need to put in jail members of Congress, you do it. There is no other way, sorry. There is no other way. There is no other way. The illusion that because you have a man of integrity as president, corruption is going to be solved is wrong, totally wrong. And you have to face them. There is something in oil policy that has to be done also, and is the subsidies. This is the moment to eliminate the subsidies. I know that in 2012, the former government did something. It was important what they did, even if they rolled back the policy. But this is the moment to do that. It's that with the fiscal deficit of this country, you cannot keep paying subsidies that most of it ends in the hands of privileged people, not in the hands of poor people. Because you need to develop a fiscal policy in which you don't depend on oil. And you know that. You need a good tax system, a good income tax, a good value-added tax, eliminate subsidies. You need to do all that. That is the task of this government, to face the crisis. The crisis, no, the problems you are facing at this moment. And be certain that in 2 or 3 years, this country will be growing fast again and doing very well. We are here in that sector doing the roads the country needs. That is what Mexico did. That is what Colombia is doing. We are in a smaller economy than Nigeria. We have a $20 billion program in roads, even having problems because we are also exporters of oil. But we have a $20 billion program, but with the full cooperation. Only private companies are doing the roads. These are not times in which the state is able to do roads. That only happens in Ethiopia with the Chinese, and I remember that in Syria something of that was happening before the civil war. But in command economies sometimes you are able. But here in this democracy, the private sector has to be able to do the roads and the railroads and the things. Those are not activities for state companies. And the other thing you have to give to the private sector is energy generation. It's unbelievable how poor, how bad the energy system of Nigeria is. I mean, that is the worst thing this country has at this moment. It's not corruption, it's having an energy system that is so bad, so small, just because don't have the rules to let private sector to invest in energy generation. A 5 megawatt system that only operates half of the time, when in South Africa they have a system 10 times. It's unbelievable that the country is not able to have a set of rules that protects investors and bring investors to generate all the energy the country needs. That is not difficult. I am sorry. The problem of this country is not corruption. The problem of this country is not being able to have the rules to have generation of energy. It's unbelievable that you are not doing that, and it's the most urgent activity you have to develop in the country. So, I mean, it's time to move in that direction, to do the roads and to do the energy generation. It's unbelievable how much the country is affected by the shortages of energy, how expensive the energy is. The other things you need to modify, it's trade policy. We have that problem in Colombia, not as serious as here. Brazil has that problem. Peru doesn't have that problem. Chile doesn't have that problem. Mexico doesn't have that problem. We live in a world in which if you want to compete internationally, and Nigeria can do it, you need open economies. Open economies, low tariffs, and that your manufacturing companies are able to buy products abroad in reasonable terms. And you can get that only with low tariffs. With the type of tariffs this country has, it's very difficult to have an industry to the level that the country can have. I mean, I am sorry to say, but the industry of this country is too weak for the possibilities it has today. It's too weak, too small. So you can do much better, but you need a much better policy. When it's so difficult and complex to import any raw material, any machine, and you have to pay so much, forget it that you are going to have manufacturing, real manufacturing. You have all the capacity. You know something? It's quite strange. Till 2 or 3 years ago, for Mexico, was very difficult to compete with China. Very, very difficult. And many plants of the U.S. plants were moving to China. Today, the opposite is happening. The Chinese do not have a skilled labor cheap anymore. They don't have it. They cannot do it. Mexico is doing much better than China in that. And I'm going to tell you the things that happen when you have good skilled labor. The Mexicans have created 1 million skilled jobs in the automotive industry. They are close to the US. 1 million jobs of skilled labor. And you get that, of course, with a policy that makes easier. There is some automotive industry, but you have to make that industry something efficient, to learn to produce parts for factories in Europe. But for that you need policy, and the policy the country has in place is no good. It's statist. It's the past of Latin America and the past of Africa. That protectionism, that idea that industries to develop need a lot of protectionism. No, what they need is the capacity to import and to export. That's what they need. Ports in Nigeria are no good. There is one way to solve that. Concessions, private ports. 20 years ago, I did that in Colombia. Today, we have very good ports. One of them is Cartagena. It will become, in 2 years, 3 years, as big as the port of LA or at the port of Miami. And why? Just because they are doing the job well. Because all big companies are sending to Cartagena and to Panama the big chips, and then they send it to Mexico and to Brazil and to Chile and to Peru. And you need ports of that kind if you want to have industry and agriculture. Otherwise, you will not. Because if the cost of transportation is so high because you have bad roads, bad railroads, bad ports, you will never compete. You will never compete. There are some concerns about social care that takes the coverage of the U.S. health system to 93 or 92 or something like that, with insurance, individual insurance. Well, 20 years ago, we created a health system in Colombia with individual insurance. We are now 90% of coverage, and we expect in 2 or 3 years to have 100% of coverage. But not with public hospitals, no. With individual insurance, and if the person, private sector to government, about the public goods, that we need water, running water, that we need sewage, that we need good roads, that we need everything of those, and that is reasonable. That is reasonable, but it's many times difficult. I mean, there is at least a rule you should establish, and we have done it in Colombia with good results. Any private company can invest in a utility or a public service, any. So in Colombia, aqueducts are private or public. It can be both. They can be both. In some places, the public company is good and it stays that way. In some others, they didn't do well. They sold it, and we have private companies. But you need to open that. You need to open to the private sector the opportunity to do those things. The state, the government, national government, or the local governments in many cases are not able to do that. Private schools, ministry, in doing administration of public, assigned that. Will you help me to administrate this school? Particularly in Bogota, that has been done with very good results. So to be creative in that is not a bad idea. I think it's important also to take from the experiences of other African countries in social activities, and I have seen that Ghana and Angola and Egypt and Morocco and some other countries have good experiences in agriculture, in social policy, in foreign investment. Even Angola is surpassing Nigeria on that. So don't go for solutions to the U.S. or to Europe. You need to look at Latin America and Africa to look good experiences. We haven't learned to do that from each other, and I think it's time to start to do that. And I am sorry we are not doing enough on that. the national NNCP, the National Company of Oil. Well, I have to give you an example that unfortunately for the moment is not very good. We in Colombia took the example of Brazil that privatized like 20 or 30% of the company, the national company Petrobras. They did very well at the beginning. They discovered the pre-salt oil. That is the largest discovery in 30 years. Then politicians started to do certain things to finance campaigns, and there was some trouble. But the Colombian company, Ecopetrol, and that is, we took it, the model from Brazil, is doing very well. It did very bad. Today it's a very good company. I'm going to tell you something. Yes, we lost money last year. But this year, the first trimester, the company won 150 years of money, $150 million in the first three months of the year. We are already in black again. And that is because the administration of this is only 10% private, but the administration of the company is like a private company. Can do anything, do things well. Even without selling the national company, you can do much better than what the company here is doing. I mean, you cannot keep that company doing what it does, losing that amount of money, lacking transparency. That can be improving. That can be improved taking the model. Mexico has done exactly the same recently, only last year. Only last year, they let the company to be handled like a private company and forgot about the long tradition of taking money from that company for everything and making so much damage to. But that problem has to be solved. That company has to be good, has to be the best company of the country. It cannot go like it's going, and the government has to face the strikes. Yes, face the strike. If it has a strategy, they will win, and the company will change, and you need to change. This country will not move well unless that company start to be handled as it should be handled. And there are examples, particularly in Latin America, that can be managed in a much better way. The banking system of this country, the financial system of this country, needs to be improved. For example, mortgages. Yes, it has improved, but it's still very, very, very small. You will never have real housing if you don't improve and you have mortgages and you have a financial system that is able to do that. You will never have small companies growing, receiving attention, if you don't have a system that is able to loan money to those small companies. The big companies of the U.S. were once small. And look at any of them, the most prosperous one, they were all small. The companies of Brazil, they were once small. I mean, you have to look at that. If you are in a society, you need to see if a small company can become a large company. If you have the conditions for that, if you help small entrepreneurs the way they need, so that small company can become a large company. For example, in Mexico, they have not been able to do that. So it's very clear, and a small company will never be a large company. I imagine in Nigeria something of that may happen. You have to solve that, and the test is that if a small company can become a large company. Microsoft was never a large company; it was a small company. Facebook was a small company. Google was a small company. Apple was a very small company. None of them was a big company. None of them was a big company. Were very small companies that became giant companies just because the entrepreneurs were able to take that to the level they have today. We were talking some bit about the how to improve the energy sector, and when I'm talking about legislation or regulation, things are very simple. You have to let people to bring back the money they put, to receive the payment for the capital they put. They're very simple things. They're not complex things. But if the state wants to have companies that they can regulate tariffs and break the companies in just 1 or 2 years, you will never get. There is nothing as easier as to have private companies generating energy. There is nothing more simple than that. Nothing. Just put the rules. Just put the rules. This country has no energy because there is no political will. Not because of corruption. It's because there is not political will to do that. There are some ambassadors of the European Union here and are going to be concerned. This issue of sustainable development has been very important because all the citizens of the planet are really, we have learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. In the case of Nigeria, there are very important problems, particularly in soil degradation, particularly in desertification, particularly in the handling of water. There is not enough aqueducts with good water. We don't. Wasting is very bad handled. But there is a solution for that in Lagos. You put private companies to take the luggage and Lagos will be clean. It's as simple as that, as it happens in many cities of the world. It's as simple as that. Let private companies to take the garbage and you will have a clean city. I do believe in that. But, until 10 years ago, you see a lot of political will for agreements to reduce the emissions of carbon dioxide, to have an agreement between all countries. That is gone. The Kyoto Protocol is gone. And I'm not saying that because I think it's a good idea to have emissions because and that you don't care. We need to use solar panels, but because they are much more efficient than electricity coming from the grid. But the industrial countries have decided that they will pay for climate change when it comes. They have taken. The U.S. took that decision, and China also, and Russia also, and the European countries are still careful, but most of the big players are not. They are going to pay. The problem is the countries of the world that are more vulnerable to climate change are Nigeria and Brazil and the Philippines and Colombia And we are the ones. So one thing you have to have in mind, extreme weather. We need to be prepared for disasters. We need to be prepared for extreme weather. No one is going to solve the problems of climate change to us. No one. We need to keep good practices. We need to tell people not to have excessive emissions. But that is our problem, how to deal with extreme weather. And we will have a lot of that in the years to come, because the industrial countries we will not be able. I mean, only thinking in China, in the expansion they have already on coal plants, it's unimaginable that they will be able to comply with any emissions. The plans they have, the plans they have in development in the next 4, 5, 6 years, the emissions of that were going to be 4 times the emissions of the U.S. So, yes, they have some will. They have worked in innovative technologies, and they are doing well, and they are doing good in solar panels, and they are trying. But no way that anyone is going to solve the problems of climate change, and it's better to be prepared that we are going to have climate change, to learn how to be under the water like the Holland, that the third part of their territory is under water. Let's learn in Lagos how to do that, unless the city is going to be underwater. So we need to learn to deal with those problems, because they will happen. They will happen, by certain. No one is doing anything to stop that. That will happen. By the end of this century, Lagos may be underwater if we don't learn how to do homes that can live with a lot of water. That is reality. That is reality, and we have to learn to be that. So that theory that you can have sustainable development and that probably we will solve those problems, I am very skeptical. I am very skeptical. I don't see that. I don't think that is happening. Let's prepare for extreme weather, I think. There is no other manner of thinking in that. And of course, I insist, we need to be careful with waste. We need in agriculture to look for the... But that is something that we should be prepared for. There is one thing I wanted to talk about agriculture, and is this. Africa only uses 15 kilograms per hectare in agriculture. The average in Europe and the US is 150 kilograms. Maybe that is too much, but if you want to think about productivity, have in mind that the difference between the agriculture that we have here and what is done in other countries is significantly different. And I want to say something else. All the exports of food in Africa, and Africa has been very successful in the last 20 years, and particularly in the last 10 years. Most countries have doubled the amount of food they produce. All the exports of Africa are less than the exports of Thailand. So yes, we have moved ahead a lot, but let's not think that we solve the problems. No, we need to work a lot harder if we expect to do better. I don't know. I think I prefer to end here and answer some questions from you.
very much again for that illuminating and engagement. Thank you. I'm going to just put a little more context to some of the things you've said, and then what I'll do is I'll start with the question, and hopefully we can take about 3 or 4 questions from the audience. One of the things that I thought was that would be great for the audience to sort of contextualize was that most of the policies that you have been talking to us about and what we have to implement and what we have to think about are things that you were able to do in your term as president. So once again, I know it's in your notebook, but President Trujillo came into power at the age of 42, and in some places in Nigeria, that is still considered a youth. So I think as he talks about leadership, we need to keep that in the back of our minds as we go ahead. Go ahead.
No. The experience I had as president, some of the things I did, but in general, in Latin America, we are looking each other and doing the things that are successful. So this is not only experience in Colombia. The only thing that is exceptional is security. The only thing we have done that is not one is spending and thinking that the only way to deal with the problems of security is to give a priority to security and to really invest in security and the judicial system. There is no other way. Yes, you may try to solve the problems other way, but if you have a lot of violence, a lot of people who don't respect the authority, you better invest in security.
Thank you. One of the things also that you talked about while you were up there is around the environment, which you're actually part of. You're the Secretary General of the Oceana, which is an environmental agency that really campaigns for keeping the ocean clean. And now you're telling us that we need to learn how to live underwater. So that is something that we're going to have to all start deep diving soon, so we can learn that skill. But what I really wanted to do, so that we're going to go into questions now, is really talk to you more about the issue of security. I know you talked about security and investing in security. And I think that security and judiciary were one of the things you talked about. But one of the things you also did in your administration, which the what global news do talk about, is the reintegration of rebels back into the society. So I think one of the things that I want to do is, yes, security investment is important, the judiciary is important, but there is also the issue of engagement. And I want to understand better how you guys have approached engagement and what advice do you have for us?
The first thing is, I want to say something I haven't said. We have been working for 12, 13 years in the Mediterranean. The situation of the Mediterranean is much better today than it was 10 years ago. The stock of fish is not going down anymore. Probably it will start to improve, but bluefin tuna. But one thing I wanted to say, the area of the world where overfishing has done more damage is the coasts of West Africa. No other region of the world has been more overfished by the Japanese and the Chinese and the Koreans and the Spanish and the French fleet. And it's incredible the damage they have done in the shores of West Africa. And something has to be done because it's dramatic. No other area of the world has been more overfished than the West Africa. The artisans, the fishing people of the area don't find fish anymore. Something has to be done about that. The other question was about...
the holistic approach when you talk about...
Oh, yeah. No. We are in negotiation process with FARC, and we will succeed this year.
Can you elaborate more?
They are there because they are living out of narco-trafficking, not because of other reason. They should have disappeared a long time ago, but they haven't, because when a guerrilla has money, forget it. You don't get peace ever if they have money. But we will succeed this year. But you will be surprised if I say we will not diminish our investment in security. Probably we will bring a lot of policemen that are in the mountains back to the cities to help security in the cities. We have done some things that are important. For example, 10 years ago, the country of the world with more kidnappings was Colombia. But not in a simple way. We had like half of the kidnappings in the whole world. Today, we are not in that. Disappeared the kidnappings. Totally disappeared. I mean, it's not more than 200 or... there are in the list of unsecure cities of Latin America. Medellin is not anymore. It's not in any number. In the list you have 1, 2, 3, 30, and there is no Medellin. You remember how was Medellin? So we have been successful on that. But we will get the agreement with FARC. They will demobilize. That is a very important achievement. People say, but we will have much better security. Not certain. Other narco traffickers will come. But you need to in history you need to put that shit past it, and the other people that stay in the business are criminals. But that mixture of having guerrillas who at the same time are narco traffickers is very damaging for society. But we will get an agreement this year, and that process is going to be successful.
Thank you. The other area that I wanted to sort of, if we could get some elaboration on, which is collaborations between Latin America and Africa. Can you give some specific areas in which you see big opportunities for Africa and Latin America to cooperate and increase trade today?
Brazil has always been very active in Africa. I think most of their experiences are broad. I think in the case of agriculture, Africa has to ask more and to put some pressure on Brazil to get more help for that. But I think cooperation South-South, particularly for social policies, is important. Maybe the African Development Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank can do something to promote knowledge of social policies and see what Africa can learn from our experience. We still have a lot of inequality. I want to say, I mean, we have been very successful in eliminating poverty. We have not been that successful in reducing inequality. And the reason is this. It's difficult to say, but it's true. International trade and technological change don't bring equality. They bring inequality. Because qualified workers win a lot more than unqualified workers. So, and there is the problem of capital, also remuneration of capital. So, even when you move ahead, even when you are successful, even a country like Chile that has been growing well for 30 years, when you look to inequality, they are not doing better. So inequality is a very intractable issue. It's not easy. You all know Piketty brought that and opened something that was in the mind of everyone but was not really work. But really your priority has to be poverty. Inequality is very difficult to solve. I mean, and when you have an oil economy, forget about inequality. That is but you know, the problems of corruption in Nigeria are basically because of oil. Be certain of that. It has happened in all the countries rich in oil. The day that people win their money working with the factory or with the agriculture, that has no tendency for corruption. Oil is terrible for that. In every country of the world where there is oil, a significant amount of oil, you find corruption. So it's not that Nigerians are bad. It's oil which has made them bad.
Thank you. We're going to take 2 questions from the audience, and we're going to do it at the same time. So if you have a question, there's a mic here. There's a question here. There's a question here in front. And then can we get another mic over there so that we could take both questions back to back?
Yes, thank you. My name is Felicio Phillips. And thank you so much for such a very forthright presentation. And I assure you, I think we've all enjoyed it. But I want to turn things around and ask what few things, and there's got to be a few, that you can say Nigeria has gotten right to date. What are the things that we've gotten right to date?
President.
You used to call Nigeria a young democracy, and sometimes are concerned because of the coups and the military people that had been involved in the government of the country. But I want to tell you, if you look to 200 years of history in Latin America, the only country that has not been authoritarian and has had a lot of dictatorships is Colombia. The only one. It has been a history of coups and military people involved in government and all that. So don't be tough on Nigeria because of that. That is democracy is not something that you get easily. No, it is not. It's something you have to fight for. And I think the country is doing today remarkably well. I mean, you can compare yourself with India. I mean, the most vigorous and big democracy in the world is India. The most diverse society in the world is India, and they have a democracy. And the second most diverse democracy in the world is Indonesia, and they are doing well today. And the other is Nigeria. They are doing well today. What you have done to defend democracy and finally get democracy is something very important. It's not easy to get. It's difficult to get.
We have last question. Our last question, please.
Okay, over here, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Your Excellency.
Yes.
Okay, a little to your left. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
We really appreciate your contributions. The discussion is very revealing, and I'm hoping we can, from everybody from one sector or the other who has listened, will be able to get something out of it. You mentioned a couple of things that I think is very, very important, and I think we're going to bring this up. This business of no country can industrialize without strong ports, viable port, seaport, etc.,
The concession.
the maritime. Huge equipments that need to be transported if we have to industrialize.
This country will need railroads because for agriculture, for mining.
I think that I also find very,
That have to go to a city.
Together, Mrs. Biola Alabi, CEO Biola Alabi Media Consulting. Thank you. for that. And thank you to His Excellency, former President of Colombia. At this point, I'd like to welcome His Excellency Professor Yemi Oshibanjo, GCON, SAN, Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, to the 3rd Ogun State Investors Forum for your remarks. Thank you very much, sir. If I may ask, can we all rise up, please, for His Excellency? Thank you. Thank you for that.
Every time you went to the UN, started by going like that on the microphone, and everybody wondered whether this was a ritual of some sort, But as it turns out, you are never quite certain whether the microphone would work. But that president, as I said, is from a state close by here. Your Excellency, the Governor of Ogun State, Senator Ibikunle Amosun, and Her Excellency, the wife of the Governor of Ogun State, Mrs. Funsho Ibikunle, honorable ministers present here, and Your Excellency President Trullo, let me just say how very honored I am to have been invited here and to speak, make a few remarks. I've been told that all I'm required to do is make a few remarks. But I must say that I was very educated by a lot of what President Trullo had to say. And I'm sure that many of us thoroughly enjoyed his intervention, and I want to thank you very much for the excellent and forthright advice that you gave. Of course, as with all these matters, I'm sure that you know better than all of us that some of what you've said, I mean, some I agree with, many I agree with, some I don't agree with. I hope I'll have time to be able to tell you the ones I don't agree with. But let's just begin by saying first that we must again commend the Governor of Ogun State for this excellent summit. This is not the first. As a matter of fact, done so well, and it's very clear what clarity of vision can do. And we can see that all over the state, the infrastructure, the industrial city. I'm told that there are about 90 companies now in the industrial area, and that already more are coming, and they seem to be coming from Lagos, which, by the way, is not always good news. I'm somewhat conflicted. I'm from Ogun State, but I've lived all my life in Lagos, and of course, I worked in Lagos. But I think that what Ogun State is doing is really excellent, especially providing the environment for industry and also leveraging on all of what you would see is required just outside Lagos. Just this morning, I was speaking to a steel company that is in Shagamu, and they were talking about the kinds of things that they were trying to do. They have just put in a 60 megawatt capacity of power. But of course, they're having some problems with getting gas and all that. But again, this is investment that has been drawn to Ogun State. I'm also excited, of course, whenever I see that Ogun State has moved up in the IGR. They are now number 5, which is dramatic considering that I remember a few years ago, and I'm glad that the former governor of Lagos State is here. A few years ago, when the argument about people living in Lagos State, and of course the finance commissioner too for Ogun State, who is now minister for finance. I remember that argument about whether people who live in Lagos State and who work in Lagos State and live in Ogun State should pay their PAYE to Ogun State or Lagos State. Lagos State had enjoyed the advantage of taking personal income tax from people who work in Lagos State but live in Ogun State. But when Senator Ibikunle Amosun became governor, and with his finance commissioner, they started quarreling with us, and they were very unfriendly neighbors, and eventually I think they sort of won that particular battle, and so here we are today. Ogun State is again, of course, the cement capital of the world, with cement factories practically everywhere, Wokoro, Shagamu, Ibeshe, and all that. And I think that it might be time for the state to begin to look at being the pioneers in using concrete for roads. We are told now by Mr. Dangote, and when a businessman tells you something, you have to keep cross-checking. He says that concrete is the cheapest way now of building roads, and that is far cheaper than asphalt. I'm not so sure whether the Honorable Minister for Works completely agrees. I know that it's not okay. He says he agrees. So perhaps it's time. Yes, concrete is cheaper. In fact, I'm told it's 20% cheaper. But as I said, it was Dangote who said so, and he's the one who owns the cement factories. But I think that it is perhaps time to begin to explore that. I think Ogun State has proved, how it is that a subnational, can actually compete with nation states. And when we compare the economy here to even Togo or Benin and all that, it's clear that there are very excellent comparisons to be made. I want to just say that at the retreat in April, that's the NEC retreat, the National Economic Council retreat, the point was made that states should be centers of prosperity. And I think it underscored the essential relationship between the federal government and the state governments, and how this relationship can be leveraged upon, and we can do a lot more in the states. And I think especially in the area of agriculture, I think there's a lot that can be done in agriculture. I know that a lot has been done already, but I think that there is just so much room for so much more. The Anchor Borrowers Program is one I'm not so sure that any other state aside from KB has benefited from so far. Now that program is one where the central bank, of course the central bank has this fund, by which it's able to lend to small farmers. And this was done in KB State. As a matter of fact, KB State, I think the total amount of money that was invested in the rice growers in KB State was about 7.5 billion. That was about 75,000 farmers, small farmers, who received these small loans. But 4 months after, and I think they've had 2 cropping seasons now, they have produced close to 1 million metric tons of rice, of paddy rice. And we're now told that the value of that is about 63 billion naira for a 7.5 billion investment. I think that there is a lot. I think there's a lot to learn from what has happened in KB State, and of course they've also entered into some arrangement now with Lagos State for milling and all that. So I think that there is so much to be derived, especially with some of the programs that we have here. I want to also talk a bit about what we may need to do in the power sector. There's no question at all that the power sector is absolutely important. And I think President Trillo pointed out that without it, very little can be done. And I agree entirely with that. Although I don't agree that it is just a matter of political will. I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it's either corruption or... I think there's an admixture of so many different things. But some of what I've seen in our efforts to get to the point where we have a viable power sector. It's just the capacity to get things done sometimes, just that capacity to do things, to actually get things done. There's policy, there are institutions and all that. But sometimes just between the policy, the institutions, and actually doing it, there just always seems to be a drag. And I think that's something that we need to work very closely on. We need to work very hard on. Because sometimes you see, for example, we have installed capacity of close to 12,000 megawatts of power, right? But it was only, I think, in November or so, and February, that we're able to generate as much as 5,000 and put as much as 5,000 out there in the grid, which is the highest the country has ever generated in its history. But there is room for so much more because the installed capacity is already there. But a lot has happened in the past few years with several of the projects. For example, there are about 40, I don't know how many transmission projects are outstanding that have just not been completed. And if those projects, even if some of them are completed, we'll be putting more power on the grid. There are so many transmission projects that were abandoned that we've had to go after. Even the NIPP projects, the huge generating plants that we had, 3 of them are still uncompleted. Those that are completed were not placed in places where they had access to gas. So we have to, sort out the gas issues. So sometimes it's just getting things done and not just an absence of political will. Even with political will, sometimes it's just the bureaucracy and moving things along the line and getting them done. I would also want to suggest that states can do a lot more in terms of generating power. And I think that we can write the regulations or rewrite some of the regulations in such a way that the states can generate more power. At the moment, we know that most states are doing, for instance, Lagos State is doing IPPs or has IPPs that are about between 10 and 12 megawatts of power. But we can do a lot more. And I think the rules can help us to be able to do, much more, especially in the industrial estates, providing power in the industrial estates. I know there will be arguments about distribution and all that, but I think that there is now enough requirement and the space is there for doing a lot more. I also just want to mention a bit also about the ease of doing business before I talk about technology and Roundup. It's clear that we need to make it easier to do business in Nigeria. It's absolutely clear. And the president has mandated our Minister for Investment, Trade and Industry to do something about the ease of doing business. We are 169 of the 189 countries in the World Bank survey. But the mandate this year and the strategic action plan to implement the budget is that we must move at least 30 spaces up. So that's going to involve a lot of doing. But where it concerns the states is that a lot has to be done in the states. Most states, of course, control land policy, titling policy, development control permits, building permits, and all of those. And that's why we think that working very closely with the states will be an important step in our ease of doing business and our ambitions to do business, to encourage business and commerce, and to ensure that business can be done more smoothly in our country. The other thing is technology. I want us to. I would say that for many young people today, the greatest attraction to business is possibly technology. I've talked to large groups of young people about agriculture, but the only time that it catches their fancy is when I'm able to tie agriculture to technology. Anytime you talk about anything, they're probably only interested in it when it relates to technology. But I think that this is an area of our economy that we need to do a lot more on. And I'm glad to say that this year the budget has made some fairly serious, I think for the first time, very serious provisions for technology. No question at all that there is already a lot of private sector investment and a lot of young people that are, of course, involved in technology. I'm sure many of us have heard of Jobberman, that a human resource company which has used technology to great advantage. And I think at the moment they're attracting investments of close to $20 million. There's PowerTech, a company that a young 28-year-olds, I think about 3 of them, who run this company. At the moment, they are in Abuja, and they monitor, a lot of our transmission. In fact, from generation to distribution, they have a facility that monitors all of that entire value chain, and even does payment assurances and all that. I have a dashboard in my office which enables me to see some aspects of power generation and all of that, and even statistics on the economy. These young people, have been able to do that using their own software. Of course, we've heard of Conga and the animation efforts here and there also. So I think that technology is an area where we need to do a lot more, and where we can encourage young people, and all they need is just the environment, a favorable environment to do so. In this year's budget, we'll be training a minimum of 65,000 young people in collaboration with several technology companies that are working with us. We already have collaboration agreements with Cisco. We're talking at the moment to Google and a few other companies that have indicated their interest in joining us to do much more in the area of training and creating opportunities for technology. Finally, I want to talk about our social investments, and I think President Trullo also mentioned the importance of social policy. And I think that, again, for the very first time, there is a very coherent social policy in our plans for the next 3 years. This year, there's a total investment of about 500 billion naira in social investments alone. And one of the interesting things which you mentioned is the conditional cash transfers, the Bossa Familia, and the version that you have in Colombia. We have that, and we are giving women, 1 million women, 5,000 naira, 1 million of the poorest women, 5,000 naira a month for, under this current budget, in order to lift them out of poverty. We think that is an important project. We think that, as a matter of fact, what we had in mind was doing far more than that, especially for the poorest. And just as you pointed out, this is a country that has large numbers of extremely poor people. And we must take that into account in all that we do. So we think the conditional cash transfer scheme is one that will begin showing exactly where we intend to go in our social policies, and we're quite excited about the prospects of implementing it. Although compared to the numbers we have, is merely scratching the surface. We also have several others, but the one I would like to point out, and which I know that the state is going to be involved in, is the homegrown school feeding program, which I'm sure Ogun State will be starting very soon. The homegrown school feeding program is one that will ensure not just nutrition, but the whole value chain, from agriculture, the nutrition of children, and of course all the caterers and all the other jobs that will be created along the lines. So I think that what we expect to see in the next few years, and I hope that all of us will. I hope that all of us will see exactly the point that has been made, which is that no matter how we slice it, I mean, we are in economic times that are challenging, but they provide us with some of the best opportunities for making a real difference in our economic life. I think that we are at a point, and a lot has been said about subsidies, for example, and what to do with subsidies and all that. And I think we're at a point where we must, as has been said, make very many difficult decisions and make very many tough choices. But I believe that the Nigerian people are prepared for all of what is required and all what it takes to be able to make a real difference. Finally, I want to make the point that there is no way that a country can make the kind of progress that we expect to make if we are not able to ensure that in public life we improve our public finance system. Our public finance system is transparent, and we ensure that there is accountability. I think that, the difficulties that we've had, a lot of the difficulties we've had as a country, a lot is related to the absence of a system of public finance that holds everyone to account and that ensures that leakages are blocked and that there is responsibility for public expenditure. I think that the next few years we'll see a lot more of that, and I think already the Ministry of Finance has been putting in place systems that will ensure accountability, will ensure that the public finance is taken seriously, public expenditure is accounted for, and that that the country itself is not exposed to some of the kinds of huge corruption that we've seen in the past few years. We expect that the next few years will be great years for this country, and I'm quite certain that when we come here next to the next Ogun State Investment Forum, we'll be talking about the kinds of extraordinary figures that we've seen in other countries, extraordinary figures of growth, of progress in so many different ways. Thank you very much.
Very good, Mr. President. If you have given every over.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think there's a I'll just going straight into this.
This is a presentation of a special plaque, a gift from the good people of Ogun State and the people of Nigeria to our dear friend and brother, President Cize Gavira Trillo. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The ministers, and they can join us so that we take a group photograph. The honorable ministers, Senator, Deputy Speaker.
It's okay, thank you. I really hope they are.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, whilst we prepare for the next session, I'd like to express sincere gratitude to His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, for what I consider to be remarkable remarks. So please, a warm round of applause for His Excellency, the Vice President. I'm always really impressed and intrigued by his calmness and underlying passion for